Broadcasting from beautiful, tropical Vero Beach, Florida, it's Money Nation with Ed Gardner.
Good morning and welcome to Money Nation. Today in Money Nation, we're going to be talking about boat racing, offshore speedboat racing with our special guest. Special guest is Jason Saris from Bolton Landing, New York on beautiful Lake George. Jason's a six-time Powerboat Class 4 world champion, operates Performance Marine out of Bolton Landing. Jason, thanks for being with us today.
Oh, thank you. I'm real thrilled to be here.
How's the weather up in Bolton Landing today?
A little wet, a little wet. We're still dealing with the remnants of the storm they sent up from down south.
I thought I saw your boat out. I was in Red Rock yesterday. I thought I saw someone told me it was your boat that was driving by. Was that you, or maybe your son was driving it?
That would have been my son. That was the green boat. That was the boat we used to race. It's since been retired, and it's his pleasure boat now.
What a pleasure boat.
Right.
Jason, tell me, you grew up in Manhattan, Upper East Side. How does a kid who grows up in Manhattan become a world champion powerboat racing? How did that ever happen?
Well, it's certainly not because I had some master plan when I was 10 years old. My folks, like a lot of people up in Bolton Landing here, it's a kind of tired story. My folks vacationed up here, and a lot of people from the metropolitan area that vacation up here fall in love with it. So when I turned 14, able to get my working papers, I started working up here during the summers. It was a great way to get out of the city for the summer. Did it all through high school. Did it through college, and I just so happened to be working in places that were marinas or resorts that had boat rentals associated with them. So I discovered I really was enthusiastic about boats, started tinkering with them. I was always one of those type of mechanically inclined folks. After graduating college with a degree in marketing and not really wanting to go back and get a master's, I said, well, I got 8 years involved in working on boats. Let me follow that path.
So then you end up going down to Fort Lauderdale after you retired. Is that where you first started really working on boats, power boats, race boats?
Yeah, so during my summers up in Lake George, I met a gentleman who was from Florida and actually raced power boats. He owned a cabin at the marina I was working at. And he said, well, if you want to come down to Fort Lauderdale and get a job, I'll get you a job where they take care of my race boat. So I took him up on it, and off I went.
When did you actually start racing? So you started working on the boats as a mechanic and things like that. When did you start becoming either the driver or the throttle man in racing boats?
So I went down there in 1980, and in 1983, the gentleman I mentioned, Bob Shear, his name is, who had offered to help me out and get me started. We maintained his race boat where I worked, and he needed a driver, and asked me if I would drive his race boat for him. And of course, for me, that was like a dream come true.
Wow.
So we went to New Orleans, Lake Pontchartrain. I was in my first race, and we actually won it too. So after that, there was no turning back.
I asked you that once first. There's always two guys in these boats, whether they're V hulls or cat boats, which you said are the more popular top end ones now. What you said, as far as the driver and the throttle man, they're equally important.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It's too rough, and there's far too much going on for any one person to operate the boat. You could never operate the boat with a foot throttle. It's way too rough. And you could never keep the boat going straight without two hands on the wheel. So, there was years and years and years ago in the infancy of the sport, people tried to just do everything themselves. And then somebody, actually a gentleman named Bob Moore, got the brilliant idea to separate the two positions and he went out and basically kicked everybody's ass.
When was that? What time period was that? Did he start doing that in the
That would have
80s,
been
90s?
probably in the mid 60s.
Oh, wow.
And it's, making a boat, keeping a boat go straight, keeping a boat on target in really rough water takes a lot of finesse with the steering wheel. As you come off of waves, you need to tweak the boat one way or another because the sea is always trying to push you one way or the other, and you have to counteract that. By the same token, the throttle-man, it's very much a lot like if anybody's familiar with motocross racing. So when you come off of a jump, a wave, if the jump has a kicker or if it has a rounded back, what you do with the throttle as you come off affects how the boat flies through the air. Give it a little shot of gas as you come off, it'll pick the bow up and carry the bow. Pull back just as you come off. That deceleration wants to make the bow go down. So depending upon what the wave is trying to do to the boat, again, you're trying to counteract that with your throttles. So it really, if you have a well-coordinated team, there's no way anybody trying to do it all themselves is ever going to be competitive.
It makes sense. It makes sense. Even driving a regular boat with a lot of waves, you got a lot of steering going on and it's tough to hold both. Tell us about your world championship. 6 times world champion. I think you were a world champion with a team in 83 or 84. Tell us about that. Was that the first time? And then you continued to win after that?
Right. So offshore racing is a little bit different from some of the other motorsports, as in, NASCAR, there's a high points champion. So in offshore, there's a high points champion as well in this country. So that's what we call the national championship.
Okay.
We've been fortunate enough to win it 4 times myself with my son. And then also with that gentleman, Bob Shear, back in the 80s, the first guy I raced with, we also won a national championship.
Beautiful.
Then there's a world championship because offshore racing involves, it goes on everywhere. In Europe, Saudi Arabia, all over the planet. So at the end of the year, they have a series of races somewhere where all the teams from Europe, from wherever, teams that race with other local sanctioning bodies that might be local racers. There's a group out in California that races. There's a group up in the Great Lakes. So all of them can come. If you've started 3 sanctioned races anywhere on the planet during the course of the year, you're qualified to run in these world championships. And that's usually another small series of 2 or 3 races done over the course of a week. And again, the winner, the high points champion of those 3 race series or 2 race series is crowned the world champion.
Is that held all over the world? Does it change venues? United States, Miami, then go to Europe and things like that?
It can, and they very often have what they'll call world championship races just because everybody's invited, but it's not necessarily sanctioned by the UIM, which is the world offshore sanctioning body. But there is a location that's chosen every year that does carry the UIM sanction. Like this fall, we're going down to Englewood, Florida in November for our classes world championships, and it will carry the UIM world champion sanction. Anybody in the world that wants to race in our class that really wants to call themselves the world champion needs to come on down to Englewood Beach in November.
Is that near Key West? Is that the race near Key West?
Well, they do have some in Key West, and Key West actually, the races there, which are, I believe, the week before the ones we're going to,
right,
will carry the sanction for some of the larger cat classes, the UIM sanction. So that will be their world championship for our classes it's going to be in Englewood.
Let me ask you this: in all the years of racing, what is your most memorable racing memory?
Well, there's probably got to be 4 of them that are all kind of tied.
Okay.
I mean, your first, right? That's got to be, and especially winning in my first race. So that's right up there. The first race I ever competed in with my son also was just a huge thrill. That was in Ocean City, Maryland. It was rougher than hell. And it was, I was very much looking forward to seeing a lot of confidence in my son, but seeing how he would do with it. Because it's, until you've done it, it's not like anything else. It's not like going fast out on a lake. And he did great. And that was a tremendous thrill. Flipping a boat over in a race and getting tossed out of it. Don't think I'll ever forget that.
Wow.
I might like to, but. And winning our first world championship together, my son and I.
Well, those are some great memories, Jason, we're going to take a quick break here. Remember, listeners, any questions about your portfolio, always feel free to give me a call at 518-255-8854, or you can email me at ed@cutterco.com. We'll be right back with more on Money Nation.
All opinions expressed by Ed Gardner and or his guests on the Money Nation show are solely Ed Gardner's and or his guests' opinions and do not reflect the opinions of Cutter & Company or any of their affiliates. You should not treat any opinion expressed by Ed Gardner and or guests as a specific inducement to make a particular investment or follow a particular strategy, but only in as an expression of their opinion. Ed Gardner's and his guests' opinions are based on information he considers reliable, but neither Cutter & Company nor affiliates and or subsidies warrant its completeness or accuracy, and it should not be relied upon as such. Always talk to your financial advisor before making such decisions.
Welcome back to Money Nation. We have Jason Saris here from Performance Marine. Jason, there's Lake George, and particularly Bolton Landing has a long history of powerboat racing and Gold Cup racers. The first one was to bring Bolton Landing was Count Manikiewski with his boat Ankle Deep. We had George Reese and his boat El Lagarto, one out in the Midwest, I believe, because if you win the Gold Cup, it comes back to your own lake. That's how it got up back on Lake George, if I'm not mistaken. And more recently, besides yourself, also Nikki Kutro from Boardwalk Restaurant and All Access Marine has won 2 Offshore World Championships. How did those guys affect you? Were you fans of George Reese and the Count? And tell me a little bit about those guys.
Yeah, well, the George and the Count were certainly before my time, but being enthusiastic about powerboats and anything that goes fast, yes, it's certainly part of Lake George's history that I was always intrigued by and proud of. And in fact, George Rice's boat, El Lagarto, is actually in the Adirondack Museum. You can go see the actual boat. And you're correct. Back in those days, whoever won the Gold Cup could choose where the Gold Cup was going to be held the following year. So the Count won it one year. And then he brought it back to Lake George. Unfortunately, he didn't win that year. But then when George Rice won it, I believe up in Detroit, he brought it back to Lake George and he won again and again. So it was on Lake George a number of times. The course was right out in front of the Sagamore Hotel, actually.
Wow.
Right out in front of where our business is.
Wow, that would have been beautiful to watch that. What do you think of that boat, El Lagarto? I always thought it was the most beautiful boat. And a lot of the Woody racers are cool looking. What do you think about that boat in particular? It was the fastest boat in the world, I guess, at one point.
Yeah, and it's very cool. It lived right in Bolton Landing, where the boathouse bed and breakfast is now.
Oh, right. Beautiful building.
And, I'm not quite old enough to remember it, but I had a lot of friends a little bit older than I, or friends' parents, that would tell us about seeing it running around on the lake. When it retired from racing, it just stayed as his pleasure boat out on the lake. And apparently George was quite a colorful guy. Gave a lot of people rides in his boat and stuff like that.
Yeah, interesting. What a gorgeous boat. I do love that boat. Let's talk, besides boat racing, let's talk about smuggling drugs in boat racing. And I think did smuggling drugs come first, or did boat racing come first, or how did they work together? I know that you worked down in Florida, and you worked for the DEA, the Customs Department, and you helped them build these boats to chase down the drug smugglers. Tell us a little bit about that. How'd that get going, and how that's happened?
Right. Well, there certainly was a time when offshore racing and drug smuggling were a little bit synonymous with each other. Similar boats that were used in racing were used for smuggling purposes. And it seemed like also a lot of the smugglers were enthusiastic about boat racing. I might add that that's changed.
Okay.
Those days are gone.
Long gone.
But certainly down in the 80s, early 80s in Florida, there was a lot of it going on back then. And yeah, I did. George Bush was the vice president, Reagan was the president, and they made a big push to try and curtail the smuggling operations. Made a deal with Don Aronow, who was a very famous boat racer himself, owned cigarette power boats, formula power boats, Donzi Marine. Those were all his companies.
That's amazing. Those are three of the best boats ever built, you know?
Yeah, very iconic names in offshore style power boats. He had started a company called USA Racing. They were building a large 39-foot catamaran, and the government looked to him to help them with a boat that they could use to combat the smuggling. I was fortunate enough to get a contract with the Customs Department maintaining those boats for them. So I acted as the U.S. Customs Department's representative in meetings with the USA Racing and Don Aronow, representing them in issues that they were having with the product and so on and so forth.
So the movie Speed Kills, starring John Travolta, came out, I think, maybe a year or two ago. Very interesting movie, all about Donzi and cigarette and Don Aronow. Tell us a little bit, Ben, since you have firsthand knowledge. You knew Don, you knew Ben Kramer, you knew everyone in these people. What happened to Don? Who would have thought that a guy who built those type of boats would be killed? And tell us what you're thinking on that, and how that happened.
Yeah, well, you got to take everything Hollywood does with a grain of salt.
The movie, you're saying?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Plus my own little pet peeve. You'd see an outboard boat pull away and they'd have inboard sound effects.
Oh, yeah.
That rubbed me the wrong way.
Yeah,
but
it
anyway,
does.
Yeah. So the U.S. Customs Department had a contract buying these boats from Don. And Don sold his company to Ben Kramer. Ben Kramer was an offshore powerboat racer and also owned Apache powerboats. Ben Kramer was also a convicted smuggler and was also continuing with smuggling operations. When the Customs Department found out that they were buying boats from a convicted smuggler, they canceled their contract. We can't have that.
Yeah.
When that happened, Ben Kramer went back to Don Aronow and said, well, you're taking the company back. Part of the assets of the company was this U.S. government contract, which doesn't exist anymore. I don't want the company. Don said, sure, I'll give you your money back, and gave him the money back that he was paid on the books. He didn't give him the cash that he got under the table back.
Conveniently forgot about that.
Yeah. And what are you going to do? Sue him? So where'd you get the money? But what Don underestimated was in those realms, in that business, they don't sue. They enforce it in other ways. And Don thought he was too big to be subject to that, and he wasn't. They hired a contract and they had him murdered.
Yep. And they never got their money back from that, did they? Or that was just make sure people don't do that to them again. Is that why they did that?
That's the message. Is now you can't do that to us. And interestingly enough, Ben Kramer did eventually end up getting convicted on other charges. He's still in jail today, but it was about 20 years ago. They tried a very daring escape where they had a helicopter land in the prison yard, and Ben Kramer jumped in it, and they were going to try and get him out. And then too many other prisoners grabbed onto the helicopter and it couldn't take off.
Oh my Lord, what a way to blow your escape plan. Oh, that's amazing. So he's still in jail and he's still alive today.
Yeah.
Amazing. Amazing. Tell us about Performance Marine. When did you come up and you formed that? Obviously when you got back from Florida, and how's business going today?
So yeah, when I was in Florida, we built a race boat for a gentleman who's from Lake George, and he got into the marine business in Lake George. And long story short, I ended up being partners with him and then bought him out. Myself and another gentleman I was working with, Rick Gage, down in Florida, moved up and went into partnership with him, and then bought him out and started Performance Marine in 1987. And I'm pleased to report business is booming. We are just really slammed.
Yeah.
I hope you don't want your boat fixed anytime soon.
I know. People are complaining about that. And we both have other friends in the Lake George, Bolton Landing area who own marinas and sell boats. And I think every single person we know, there are no boats. Why is it? How come boats are so popular now with this COVID in the last year?
Well, I think when the pandemic hit, it had a lot of people were looking for things that they could do. Now, what you weren't going to do was take your family's dream European vacation. You weren't going to get on an airplane. You weren't going to go to some country where you might get stuck there. The borders might get closed. Who knows? So people were looking for activities that they could do that they felt safe doing. And, you go out on a boat with your family. They're the only ones you're exposed to. It's a great family activity. And Lake George is also perfectly situated. Now, we're easily accessible from the greater New York metropolitan area, Boston, Philadelphia. People were also comfortable coming here because it's a day's drive. They don't have to worry about staying overnight anywhere. Didn't have to take an airplane, any of that. So, I feel awful for so many people whose businesses were devastated by COVID. And, but Lake George has enjoyed the past 2 years record setting.
It is one of the most beautiful lakes on the country. So that's another draw beyond everything else you mentioned there. Tell us one other thing. How did a powerboat racer, world champion, businessman be in a rock band? Tell us about your rock band with. Well,
that goes back to high school also.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I was always enthusiastic about music. I always tell everybody I had the best of both worlds. I spent my summers up in Lake George, and I spent the rest of the year in Manhattan. So I got to see a lot of great bands during a great time in rock music. And it's another bug I got. I started playing guitar when I was 15 and just never quit.
Well, I like watching. I think I've seen you like 5 times this summer so far. So I think I've seen your band more than anyone else's band this year, but it's great. And love watching you guys. Hey, Jason, I want to go out for a boat ride. Okay. That's the one thing I want you to take me out on that boat. I look forward to that, but thank you for being here. Look forward to talking to you in the future. Good luck with the World Championships in November. Maybe we'll have you on after that and you can tell us about how everything went. Why don't you come down and do a podcast from there? I may do that. That would be phenomenal. That's a great idea. Good, Jason. Thank you very much for being with us. Have a great day, and I'll see you back up in Bolton soon. All right. Thank you. Thanks, Jason. Yep. And remember, listeners, any questions about your portfolio, any questions at all, feel free to give me a call at 518-255-8854, or you can email me at ed@cutterco.com. And remember, all previous interviews are on YouTube. You can just go to YouTube and search Money Nation channel. Thank you very much for everyone being with us. Have a great day.